Hey Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, sir. Hey man,
Ex-
before we get started, I'm gonna tell the listeners the conversation you and I just had, if you don't mind.
yeah, sure. But just FYI, I tend to go by Andreas.
Oh, okay.
It's only at work that I go by Andy because nobody speaks the language other than the front office. So
All right. So Andreas, I'm going to let the listeners know about the
yep,
conversation we just had, which is typically when I start one of these, I send a heads up. Hey, on Facebook, are you good to go? Because sometimes people forget. They talk and oh shoot, you know what? You got me while I'm in the car. Give me 5 minute kind of
yeah.
thing, right?
Oh yeah, go for it. Go for
Um,
it.
so I reached out to our friend Andreas here, and I didn't get a response. And then it clicked into me that I'm dealing with a man who's not in my generation, or our generation for many of my listeners. This is what happens when you dig into the archive and you try and find the pioneers of our scene. You get guys that are not as Facebooky as the rest of us. And that's what we have found here. This is Andreas, who is one of, I believe, three members of Techniques Berlin.
Yep.
But you as an individual I will talk about the group, but I'd love to dig into your brain about the underground culture, a little bit of backstory, I guess, to the listeners of our relationship. I know Andreas from our 9 to 5 world, and the pleasure of hearing his stories whenever I drop into his shop, getting to chat with him and listening to him tell tales from the late 80s, early 90s. I had to have this conversation with what I'm doing on my podcast. Um, so, with that, how are you this evening?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I've got one of my old cats like sitting on top of me right now, so
Who's on top of you right now?
trying to shoo him off at the moment, but
Oh,
he's 17, so he doesn't like to go away so fast.
you know what? I have two fur friends that tend to make cameo appearances in a lot of my videos. I have a dog and a cat,
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
oh, it's awesome, except for when someone's having like a serious dialogue and my cat won't stop attacking the microphone cord. I'm just
which is why I don't allow my guys in the studio, especially when I'm recording. So
right. Like I honestly, man, my heart starts racing because I'm like, I've got someone like yourself in the middle of a deep dialogue, and I'm just waiting for the kunk and just pull out and like, shit, there goes everything, you know? Uh,
oh yeah, totally. And for me, it's the experience of having a 20-pound Siberian decide that one of my keyboards on the keyboard stand is a perfect view from the window,
oh wow,
and is on the side, and the thing kind of flips 90 degrees and goes shoop, clunk, smash.
those
So
guys, man, and that's a big cat you got, man. 20 pounds,
yeah, he's a Siberian. So
big cat, man. Okay, let's dive into some fun questions. I want to. I'm gonna
sure.
start. I'll start off with some personal ones, and then we'll dive into some music related ones. So the first one I've got for you, if you can
Yeah.
remember, what was the first album or record or music that you ever purchased with your own money?
With my own money, that would have to be John and Vangelis, Friends of Mr. Cairo.
Please
Um,
educate me because I have no idea who that is.
yeah, okay, so I didn't know who it was really either, but there was a track called Friends of Mr. Cairo that came out around 81-ish when I was around 13. And, I didn't quite realize how it was produced at the time. I just knew I was drawn into it. But, it was very drum machine and keyboards. Um, and it was just something I had to have. I didn't really realize until later on that Vangelis was one of the pioneers of electronic synthesizer music from Greece. And he'd had a string of albums starting from, around the early to mid 70s, actually. So it's kind of fitting that, I ended up buying that album for the first one with my own money.
So, is it safe to say that as a child, right out the gate, you were into the synthetic sounds, the electro?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. I mean, the first thing that really, really hit me and got me interested was Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen, which came out when I was about 10 years old. And it was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. And I was living in Germany at the time, and was listening to Radio Luxembourg, where I heard it. The DJ was talking about how the music was entirely synthetically produced. This is 1976, when that kind of stuff typically didn't get much airplay. let alone become hits. And, the first thing I remember thinking is like, gee, I wonder what this synthesizer looks like, and it was really a fascination ever since.
Well, and that kind of leads into my next question, which would be, do you remember the first concert that you ever attended?
Oh, you're gonna laugh.
Go.
It was Nana.
It was who?
Nana, as in 99 Red Balloons.
I know who Nana is.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, that was my first concert.
Well, hold on though. Let's dig into that for a second. You were living in Germany. Was it while you were in Germany?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so it makes sense because they were huge in Germany, were they not?
Oh, massive.
And if I'm not mistaken, that song "99 Red Balloons" is about the World War. It's like about the Nazis dropping bombs or something. If I'm
Actually, it's more about the potential of World War III.
Is that what it is?
Because the story behind it is, essentially someone's having a peace rally and let's go all these balloons, and then, the governments see these blips on the radar and think they're being attacked, and then the jet fighters go out, and that kind of starts World War III.
There you go. See, I remember it being a happy song that if you listen to isn't so happy, which are many songs.
If you lived in Germany, because we had East and West Germany back in those days, and they would test out the air raid sirens every Saturday at noon. And if you're like me and have ADD, you kind of forget what day and what time it is, and you hear this thing coming on, and you're like, oh shit. And then you're like, oh wait, that's just a test, never mind.
Still, man, that's deep. I don't want to go too far off topic, but do you want to talk about that for a little bit? Like, what was it like? How old were you? You were there while the wall was still up, eh?
Yeah. So I was 10 when we got there in 1976. And then we moved back when I was 16 in 1983.
So the wall was still up?
The wall was still up, and, governments and cities are spending massive amounts of money building these gigantic underground shelters, for nuclear war kind of thing. Like where I was living, they built this thing that was so massive that you could actually have a quarter of the population live in this thing for 20 years, So when you see government spending that kind of money, you take it pretty seriously. You're like, okay, this is going to happen one day, and you kind of don't expect much of a long life. You figure, one day it's just going to go boom. So let's just make the most of whatever time we have.
Wow.
So you see a lot of like 13, 14, 15-year-olds in nightclubs and stuff. So
I can't imagine, honestly. Like, you can laugh about it now, but I can't imagine. In your opinion, do you think the wall coming down was good for the citizens of Germany?
In general, yes. It had to happen. Unification had to happen because it was written into the West German Constitution that any East German who wanted citizenship would get citizenship. So it's just a matter of time, right? So
I get you. It totally wasn't. It happened faster than looking at all the things that take place in history. It's amazing that one was so short. Because
but the thing is, like that time in Germany, it really shaped a lot of my outlook and my philosophies, and it really was really responsible actually for most of the music that we did as Techniques Berlin in the early days. So like our first cassette had a picture of the Berlin Wall on it.
We actually have that picture up right now.
Oh wow, yeah.
I decided to put that picture because I know your first album cover was Stories of Life, Ice of Age or something. What is it called?
Yeah, Stories of Life in the Age of Ice.
Right. And that's your album cover, right? And it's got the Berlin Wall?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's actually... I didn't want to put up any of your pictures because I didn't want to take away from the rest of your group, and I thought that was a good neutral photo to throw up.
Yeah. For sure.
Okay, with that, let's kind of try and dive into the rave. I know you've taken a bit of a different path than most of the people I've spoken to, but I do know you know the rave. What would you say was your first rave experience?
My first real rave experience, I think, was one of my co-conspirators in Techniques Berlin. He had started a project called Infermental, which was heavily influenced by the techno scene, and actually, we were heavily influenced by electronic body music and acid house and new beat and sampling technology. So it kind of became a logical progression to start a whole bunch of different bands with different sounds. So the thing was, one of Chris Shepard's associates, I think his name was Wes, he started a club on Richmond Street. It was 23 Richmond Street, actually, called 23 Hop. And it was sort of the first of its kind. He started, I think it was in late 1990, unlicensed, no alcohol served, just selling water and stuff. And their main focus on their DJ nights was early stuff like LFO and 808 State, and the best of Detroit techno from 1990-91. So I think it was April 91. My friend Dave gets the call to book a show at 23 Hop for his instrumental project. And I think I was doing some sub-mixing, like behind the scenes kind of thing, a bit of production for the live show. And it was an amazing experience because, the DJs were playing a lot of techno that, most people in the industrial scene really hadn't heard of yet. And it was, a lot of people say that was probably the first mainstreamish rave in Toronto at 23 Hop that night.
I love it. I throw this out to my listeners that if you can remember 23 Hop or something before it, please share your stories, because I don't know what you're talking about. When I think pioneers, I've dropped the name Dr. Trance.
Yes.
Was he involved with this with Wes and Shepard?
Well, I mean, him and Shepard worked together at the time because Dr. Trance, Don Burns were at CFNY, I think, until about 1993-ish, maybe early 94, and along with Craig Bezak, and they all kind of got terminated around the same time. So, I mean, while Don Burns wasn't associated at that moment, I didn't meet him until about a year later. He was definitely very well aware of the scene and very much into it, as far as I understand. I remember meeting Don Burns in 92 when we played Club Max with Electronic Dream Factory and another band called Acid Test. And I remember him introducing himself and talking quite a lot about his knowledge of what was going on in the electronic scene, especially the rave scene. So he was definitely into it at the time, for sure.
Well, and what I want to say for those who don't know who Dr. Trance is, that is who Don Burns is. When we mention those names, they're one and the same. Yeah. He passed away, I believe, in 2015. And yeah. I sadly never met the man. I only hear about him through these amazing stories where I hear about our roots. His name is always synonymous with it. Could you share some Dr. Trance stories that might, our listeners might like to listen to?
Okay, well, the first one is a kind of sad-ish story. Basically, he was when he was at CFNY still, aka I think it was called Modern Rock, but it was just before they became The Edge, and he was second in command as far as music directing goes. I think Craig Bezak was first, and at that time, one of our side projects, Bang Electronica, we had a CD out and it hit the charts in Germany, and Craig Bezak and Don Burns decided, hey, let's put it on rotation on CFNY. At the same time, we were also involved with a band called Digital Poodle, which had gotten a lot of airplay on CFNY. But anyway, so one Saturday night, Dave calls me up and he's like, oh my God, Don Burns is playing one of our tracks from the CD TV long. He's put it in the playlist. And we're like, wow, that's amazing. I can't believe it. It was, great having made his acquaintance a couple of years earlier. And a week later, Don Burns and Craig Bezak are both fired. and that was the end of us being in rotation on CFNY.
Well, but you know what? That goes a lot to saying about an individual, about how much he cared about the growth of a certain style of music, that he used his platform that I'm sure he didn't earn overnight. He worked really hard to get there. And
Oh yeah.
I think he knew what he was doing by playing your song. I think
Oh yeah.
he knew he was writing his own pink slip. You know, it's like, but that's what you do, man. And Don, it's not like he was done after that. It's not like you never heard from Dr.
No,
Trance.
I mean that was the beginning of his second career.
Exactly.
You know, he went to, I think it started. I can't remember which was first. I think it was Dance 108 before it became Energy 108.
I was gonna say it was. I knew it was 108. I don't know what it was called, but it was 108 next.
Yeah, and you know he did play a whole bunch of our associated projects on that radio station. Like we started a label called Bomb Shelter back in the 80s. So he played a lot of our Bomb Shelter bands on 108, which was just fantastic. Like he played instrumental quite a lot. And then another great moment was the one of the Atlantis raves that he chose to hold at the Ontario Science Centre back in 1992. That had never been done before. Up until then, raves were very much very underground, in abandoned warehouses or abandoned clubs kind of thing, where you'd have to call a certain phone number to get the information so that you knew where it was. And that was, I think, Atlantis was probably one of the first public raves that was held here in Toronto.
Sorry to cut you off, Andreas, but one thing I want to say about what he did by booking the Science Centre is he started something not only by bringing us into public buildings, but the whole culture now kind of floats around this. Well, not anymore, but it did for a long time. Find a good venue and everyone let's use it. And the Science Centre became autonomous with jungle drum and bass. Citrus, for instance. When you brought up the Science Centre in conversation with me, a few weeks ago, I immediately went to Citrus and I said, yeah, like in 99, 2000. You're like, no, 92. And I'm like, oh, well, you're way before me then. But to know that the reason why I went to a party in 2000, I forget when the Citrus Jam was, but because of something this man did 7-8 years before, he really did pave a path for. And out of the Science Centre, what came after that? You had the Dawn Jail, you had the Better Living Center, you had all these big venues that we started getting accepted into during the glory days.
Oh yeah, and then all the stuff down at the beaches and all that.
Oh yeah, the docks. Or hold on, are we talking the beaches out east Toronto, or are we talking down by Polson?
Yeah, well, the Cherry Beach raves for a couple of years.
Yeah, they still do them on Sunday nights, I think. But yeah, you're right. The big venues. I remember there was a place, I brought it up, E-Space. Do you know E-Space?
Yeah.
Over at Keele and St. Clair. It's an old pig slaughterhouse that they turned into those kind of venues remind me of the old school rave, but
oh yeah
I don't like them. I don't go, man, I wish we were back in the slaughterhouse. I'm happy that we aren't there, but there's something. We're also no longer in the Science Centre. We aren't accepted. Do you remember, this is kind of sidebarring, it's about the Science Centre Jam, but do you remember that little space in between the two rooms? It was like an escalator thing that you had to go through.
Oh yeah.
And you'd see all the kids that were all drugged out high as kites, sitting around the wall, and that's probably why the Science Centre didn't want us back no more.
Well, it kind of reminded me of 23 Hop, because there was a staircase that went upstairs that actually led nowhere. It led to a permanently locked door. A lot of kids would hang out there just trying to get a grip on reality again.
Oh man. Okay. Let's. I want to talk a bit about your music itself. Okay. When looking up, I've listened to your music, and I don't want to taint it by saying what I think your music is, but these are the terms I've heard: new wave, alternative, synth pop, electro, retro. What would you say your sound is?
I would probably say all of the above for Techniques Berlin. Synth pop would probably be my most preferred term, as well as minimal wave. But it's really hard to pigeonhole, because one of the things I see in a lot of the scenes is things get extremely pigeonholed. In Europe and in South America, it's a lot more open. we've been getting rave reviews about it because they're saying, well, we're breaking out of all these boxes, right? Whereas, like in North America, we got one review that was, particularly, I wouldn't say bad, because apparently for this guy, it's one of the best reviews you can get. But his main complaint was, well, these sort of vocals don't belong with this style of music.
Well,
and I've never been one to want to be inside boxes. So yeah, synth pop, minimal wave, minimal synth pop. Those are probably where I'd go with that.
one thing I notice about the identification or labels we put on certain musics is as we progress, those labels change. And calling your sound alternative in 1988 would make sense, but calling it alternative today is just ridiculous to me.
Well, actually, the funny thing was back then, the biggest problem we had with labels were like, well, you guys are too alternative to be pop, and you guys are too pop to be alternative. So,
But it's silly to me because honestly, if I was listening to you in 1988, to me, you're in the same category as a Depeche Mode, in my opinion. Like when I listen to your sound, it's like Duran Duran-ish, Depeche Mode. Those are the sounds I think of.
yeah. But we thought that. We thought that and some new orders thrown in.
Yeah.
But it was different time. Like things were very much defined by boxes. If you listen to CFNY in the '80s, some listeners, well, you were on their hit list, kind of thing. If you were into punk, you couldn't listen to ska. If you were into ska, you couldn't listen to new wave and all that kind of stuff. So boxes were really, really, really defined back in those days.
I think it's still defined. I myself go to these concerts. That big one I attend every year with the heavy metal bands.
Yep.
Okay, so that's filled with bands from Anthrax, Sepultura, Megadeth, but you also have bands like Weezer, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll be sitting there, and so who are you here to see? And I'll be like, oh man, I like Alice in Chains, Motley Crue, Weezer. Weezer?
Yeah.
What the fuck? And I'm like, yeah, I like Weezer. Fucking pussy. And it's
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? What? But I get it, because here's the funny thing, is one of the greatest crowds that you can see is when Megadeth leaves the stage and Weezer
Yeah.
gets on. So you see
Yeah.
all these headbangers leave the mosh pit while all these kids with their beach balls and tank tops come in.
Oh, totally.
So it's a great crowd shift, but...
I totally know what you mean because, I'm assuming you're familiar with the name the Sisters of Mercy?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so they were quite the goth band. So imagine my surprise when I saw a concert announcement and immediately bought a ticket for Sisters of Mercy with Anthrax and Public Enemy, 1991.
Public Enemy, eh?
Public Enemy, Anthrax, and the Sisters of Mercy. It was one of the most amazing things.
What was
I've
the
ever
crowd?
seen.
Right away, I'm wondering, what was the crowd? Was the crowd a bunch of people that were there to see Public Enemy and then a bunch of people that were there to see Anthrax? Or were it people that actually liked all three bands? Like,
it was interesting. I would say that you had, probably... okay, I'm not going to do math right now, but I'd say it was probably a slightly larger contingent for Anthrax as well as Public Enemy as it was for Sisters, but it was pretty close. So, imagine seeing all these headbangers and a sea of people dressed in black and a sea of red rap fans, and it was one of the most amazingly well people get along kind of thing. The tour later on, as far as I know, got canceled halfway through because there was in the States there was a lot of violence between the different factions.
Yeah.
In Toronto, like everybody was getting along, everybody was having a great time. I always find Toronto music scene is extremely cross cultural. Because I remember if we go back to like 1986, 1987, when like industrial / EBM, electronic body music, was emerging alongside, what was left of the old new wave, right? And house music was coming along right around the same time. There's this club called Nuts and Bolts that was quite popular with the so-called freaks. And the DJs there, I think Ivan Palmer was one of them, were getting extremely diverse with their music. So in 1 minute you'd hear Divine, the next minute you'd hear Front 242, and the next minute you'd hear something like House Nation by the Housemaster Boys, you know. So you'd see people like, you know, in the industrial long coats and the big heavy boots dancing alongside, you know, guys in Adidas and stuff like that. And it was just, it was so accepted, you know. And I think that sparked a lot of ideas and a lot of different musicians to combine these different styles of music. So when the Sisters, Public Enemy, Anthrax show came, it was a massive success.
Well, and for what it's worth, this year at the rock show, they just announced the lineup, and the one of the headliners is Prophets of Rage. And
oh wow,
are you familiar with that band? Prophet?
Yeah, it's Chuck D's project, isn't it?
From what I know, it's Chuck D. So you got, I guess, the guys from Public Enemy, yeah. You've got the guys from Rage Against the Machine, and I believe Cypress Hill.
Yeah.
And so those guys all together. So I'm gonna get to see kind of that, and you know they're playing alongside I don't know, Day to Remember, and Weezer's gonna be there, and Godsmack, and Henry Rollins, and The Used. It's gonna be a rock concert, but they always had like Snoop Dogg was there one year, Ice Cube was there another. They always have a hip hop. Last year was the Wu-Tang Clan. I think I showed you. I got to meet.
Yeah,
Wu-Tang.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, it is cool when they combine. I'll tell you. This is kind of off topic, but I'll say the weirdest lineup I ever saw of three people that I didn't know who put them together was Oasis with Neil Young and Alanis Morissette at Molson Park in Barrie. And
I can kind of see that.
I remember, but I remember like, who the hell is this lineup for? Like, who's popping in their Alanis CD, throwing in some Oasis, and then putting on Neil Young? Like, that's not.
Well, hang on. Let me rephrase that. I can see that in 1994.
And it was, to be honest, I think you're probably hitting. It was probably 96, 97, because we're probably talking right after Jagged Little Pill kind of time, right?
I mean, don't forget though, Pearl Jam and Neil Young did that. That big thing, and Neil Young was massively respected with the grunge kids, right?
I guess.
Because they kind of, he's kind of got, how Iggy Pop has the status with the punks for being the grandfather of punk. A lot of the grunge kids see Neil Young as the godfather of grunge.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. When I think grunge, I think of all the Seattle guys, like the Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana. I never.
Oh yeah, but everybody's got the one guy they point to when they say, well, this is my first album, right? And then for them, it was probably Neil Young. Yeah.
You know what? I to be honest, I felt honored when I met the Pixies because of that. Because I was like, these are the guys that influence the guys that I listen to, and that was one of my most humbling. Like, if I don't want to go down the name dropping list of people we've met, but that was a very humbling moment for me to say, oh my God, I just met a legend. And I met Iggy Pop too. Like, I didn't meet him like, hey Iggy, how are you? But it was like, oh my God, that guy just rubbed up against me, like, as he walked by. But it was he's small. I didn't realize he's as small as he is. Like, and he looks fucking great for his age. He looks great. But he was there last year actually at the Wu-Tang thing. But anyways, let's dive into this next.
For me, my big celebrity moment, I think, was meeting Peter Hook, ex New Order, ex Joy Division.
Where did you meet him?
What's that?
Where did you happen to meet him?
He was in town. He had a solo project called Monaco, and one of my friends had backstage access and got me back there. So it was quite something. It was amazing because he played like a Joy Division song at the very end. I mean, nowadays he's touring Joy Division stuff, but back then he never really did that. So I was like, man, I was really surprised that you guys did Warsaw. And he looked at me and said, what? So was I.
Why, was it dangerous or something? Like, why wouldn't he do Warsaw?
Well, the thing was, I mean, they weren't really known for doing Joy Division tracks on their solo tour, but I guess he just felt like it. And it was so obvious that it wasn't planned because everybody on stage was looking at his fingers, what he was doing on the bass, so they could kind of follow along. So it definitely came across rather unrehearsed,
Gotcha. And well, hey, big ups to him for doing that. It is special when you get to meet somebody that you've grown up listening to, and honestly, doing what I'm doing right now. You're kind of a special interview in a sense that I get the pleasure of talking to you at least probably once a month anyways. Um,
Yeah,
but
true.
but not like this, right? It's always more work related. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
with that, I want to talk about your trip. If I'm not mistaken, you just got back from Mexico. Is that right?
yeah. We did.
What were you doing down
And
there?
well, basically, it turns out that part of our biggest fan base is in Mexico, and the guy who owns a club down there, he had Rational Youth, another Canadian synth pop band from the '80s. He had them play back in November, and next thing you know, we get an email asking if we want to do an all expenses paid show down there. So we're like, hell yeah! And it was great because I mean the fans were incredibly responsive. The promoters were incredibly generous with accommodations and everything, and so basically the idea was to promote the album and just kind of promote our presence. But one of the funniest things that happened too was because Dave and I had been in various different bands and different genres. Dave was thinking of doing a performance with a side project. He's been writing some sort of industrialist stuff lately. So he's going to go on his disco sector, two bands in one kind of thing, right? And so the last minute, he's like, "Do you want to do a couple tracks with me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So before the Techniques Berlin performance, I came up on stage and told the audience, "It's like, okay, so to pay for our tickets, we got to do the two bands in one thing. So first, here's some industrial stuff. We're disco sector. Stay tuned for Techniques Berlin a bit later." And to our surprise, the audience was just totally into it because down there, they can be into industrial and synth pop and goth and a whole bunch of different styles, and nobody kind of blinks twice at it. There's two other bands opening. One was called Neue Straßen. They're from Mexico, as well as another band called I Can Fly, and it was the most amazing sort of 80s post-punk goth, from Mexico City. It was phenomenal.
That's
It was
neat.
just a great time.
That's
Totally
awesome.
great time.
Well, and can you tell me about, obviously, as a Canadian traveling, we're always curious about the security and the authorities in Mexico. At any point, did you feel in danger?
Not at all. Like, we stayed in an area called Roma, which is mostly sort of conferences. There's the campus of the University of London nearby. So you don't get people begging for money kind of thing. I mean, you do notice, when you're sitting at a street cafe outside, there is usually a guy in a suit nearby that turns out to be a security guard.
Oh, okay.
And, they seem to know all the quote-unquote regular bad people, because I remember we were sitting at an Argentinian restaurant one night, and, this guy's sort of edging closer to the restaurant, and the guy in the suit just kind of shoots him a look, and the other guy puts his hand up and walks away, kind of deal. So,
Wow.
but we felt entirely safe in that area.
Well, that's
Totally
good.
safe.
That's good, and it's good to get you back safe and sound. I know you're always working on things, so what can we expect to hear from Techniques Berlin in 2018?
Good question. Because Dave and I have always been, we've always had a lot of side projects on the go. Dave just released a 7-inch single for his project Auto Panic, with a singer from Berlin. I've got my own Agents in Infrared project going on at the same time. Also, one of our older industrial EBM bands, Bang Electronica, we've got a reissue of one of our singles coming out of the 12-inch.
Wow.
And, every once in a while we still get together and do a bit of writing. I mean, this album that just came out, Breathing, it was between the writing, recording, and mixing was about a 1.5-year process. And we were completely focused on that. So, we're going to be writing a few more songs. We'll probably end up issuing a 7-inch single or two in the meantime before we have another album ready. But yeah, it's going to be one of those years where who knows what's going to happen, you know.
Well, that's awesome, and I obviously I'm going to grab all the links because it sounds like you've got so many different projects going on that when I post this video, I'm going to leave numerous links below so people can listen to your stuff.
Yeah,
And
that'll be great. I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
we did like back in, I think it was around '86-ish. You know, Dave was kind of branching out into more projects, and he was kind of the brainchild that had the idea of we don't necessarily have to follow a single style. We can just create more bands, right? So at one point, him and I were producing some rap stuff down in Niagara. We had sort of an acid house band called Cut to Kill. We had an industrial band called Bang Electronica. I was doing Panic Orchestra, and there was just so many side projects. Like we used to joke around about something called the bomb shelter scam, which was, we had 10 bands on our label, and it was comprised of about 6 people in total in various different combinations. And we still kind of have that philosophy, you know, so we don't stick to a certain style, we just come up with a new band name for something else.
Well, but that, you know what, I think that's smart in so many, it's smart to an extent. If you can keep track of everything you're doing and you can make each thing what it is, then that's great.
Yeah.
It's very, I think, misleading. Even I, as a entertainer, I can't, you know, I'm Aaron Richmond when I do these podcasts, and then I'm Vivid when I get on the microphone and do that thing. But to bring the Vivid persona, if you will, into this, it would be,
Right.
I think it would be unfair to my listeners who are expecting me to have a normal dialogue with a human being than to come on here and be like, you know, rinse out my DJ. What the hell? What happened to Aaron? And vice versa. It would be horrible if I got on the microphone and started trying to converse with the crowd. That's not.
Yeah, no, trust me, I know that feeling all too well because I was on a internet radio station called Flashback Alternatives for, I don't know, 6-7 years. And I was always like, you know, doing this is DJ Formaldehyde, Flashback Alternatives on a Saturday night, you know?
There it is. But here's the thing: is that you have to separate those personas because it's unfair to think you're going to have 100 fans and you're just going to shove you down their throat every day. It's like, no, it's almost like the Stephen King thing I think of right now. Like when you get a Stephen King novel, you know you're getting a scary story. But when you buy, I forget his other alias, but the Shawshank alias, the Stand By Me alias, you know you're getting that type of a book, right? So Stephen King has been nice and kind in telling us, look, if you're buying my King, it's this, and that's good because as consumers we need that. But okay.
Well, I mean, the funny thing was always like, you know, Al Jorgensen from Ministry and his piles of different side projects. You know, you had Ministry, and then you had Revolting Cocks, which was him and a guy from Front 242 in the beginning, and then
the Revolting Cocks
came in and all that, and then there was.
Hold on, Andreas, did you say their name was the Revolting Cocks?
Yeah.
I love it. That's an awesome name. Were they a punk band?
And no, they were kind of almost heavier than Ministry was.
Okay.
They were industrial, and apparently they got together, and they weren't even a band yet, with a guy from Front 242, and they're apparently being really obnoxious and rude in a Chicago bar. And I guess the owner said, "Get the F out of here, you bunch of revolting cocks." And they're like, "That's it."
That's it. Thank you. Can I tell you, do you remember a band called, people call it COC, Corrosions of Conformity? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Corrosion of Conformity, Stormtroopers of Death.
But hold on, let me just say, there's a funny story I have of those guys. I don't know them, but I just have a funny story of them. They were supposed to perform 2 years ago at Rockfest, and I'm not sure if they ever did, because what happened is they jumped the fence and went swimming in the lake, buck-ass naked, and their tour manager, I remember watching her run around trying to get their clothing and then get it to them, but they couldn't get back in because they didn't have their lanyard passes. And because of where they got to in the water, they separated. And their 3 band members were all at 3 different separate gates. So it was, it was fucking hilarious. But I was like, there you go. That's 80s. There's your 80s scene right there. That's them.
Oh, yeah, totally. And it's funny you mention them because, I mean, those guys were the same deal. Like, there were so many different bands all under the same guys, you know?
You're right, exactly that. They were a motley of like 10 different bands, but 3 different guys making them. But hey,
it was always an abbreviation of 3 letters.
It is. I'm working. Actually, I say this to people right now because I work for GPC, which owns a company called EIS and has a division called GCG, and I work for Empire, but Empire is owned by GCG, which is a division of EIS, which is owned by GPC. So it's all these acronyms that convolute my career. But anyways,
Oh, yeah.
we said we were going to go for 15 to 20. It's been a little over 40, so I'm going to let you go. But I've got one last question. One last question, which I've given a bit of a twist because usually I direct this towards the rave. But with you not being much of a raver, I wanted to switch it up a little. If you could put 5 items in a vault that would encapsulate Canada, what would those 5 items be?
Okay, well, I guess it would probably end up. Oh man, that's tough. Encapsulating Canada, because it's so incredibly diverse. You know, I would probably start with an Inuit soapstone carving.
I thought you were just going to say an Inuit. I was like, oh my God, dude, you can't just shove an Inuit in the vault. Get in there, you Inuit.
It's really bad.
So sorry, what was it? It was an Inuit sculpture? Is that what you said?
Sculpture or soapstone carving.
Okay, all right.
Because I did spend a great deal of time up north too in my life. I would probably, I guess you can't really put a bush plane in there, but maybe a book on bush pilots.
Okay, I like that. That's the show. That's different. I like it.
Pierre Burton's book on building the Canadian Pacific Railway, because I think that would definitely convey a lot to people about the makeup of Canada in general.
Wouldn't you say that that's a little bit of a taboo topic?
What's that?
Wouldn't you say that there's a bit of a taboo topic there? Talking about how Canada built the railway is kind of talking about Canada's slave trade, is it not?
Yeah, it is, and that's another reason why it should be in there, to highlight that happened.
But that didn't happen. We're not like that here, Andreas. We are good people. We never had slaves. What are you talking about?
Exactly. It was funny because you beat me to that point, actually. Because I was going to say, to highlight, the fact how many people lost their lives during that process, I guess to lighten it up a bit.
Yeah, thanks.
I would want to see if I could put a CBC Brave New Waves archive in there to highlight all the Canadian music that was played on that show between the early 80s to, I think the show went off the air in 2007.
I didn't realize it was on in the early 80s. I remember that show. I thought it was like a late 90s show.
It started Brent Bam. Well, it was before. There was somebody actually before Brent Bambury, but.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Brand Van 3000. I was like, oh my God.
No.
Do not bring
Brent
him.
Bambury. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm trying to think of what number 5 would be.
Well,
I don't know.
How about we throw an Eskimo in since we already have an Inuit?
Well, that would cause you a lot of trouble.
Yeah, sorry if that's. I don't know if I'm. If that is that racially correct to say Eskimo anymore? It's wrong.
Absolutely not.
Oh.
I don't know. I probably. I guess a map of what this place looks like now. Because things can change in 100, 200, 300 years, who knows? The same way that you look at a map of Europe and it's significantly different now,
You know what I think will change in about 200 years is our accent. I bet we'll sound a lot more like this by then. Hello.
Yeah. You never know.
Hello, Andreas. Welcome to Canada, yes? But anyways, buddy, one question I skipped over and I want to just touch on quick. I'm going to do this. I was saying it before. I'm going to leave links to all your music, but if people want to hear, just please tell them now. If they want to hear your music, where can they go to hear it?
Okay. Actually, YouTube is probably the easiest place. got playlists on our website as well, which is techniqueberlin.wix.com. But I mean, there's music of ours under various incarnations, like Bang Electronica, Cut to Kill, Panic Orchestra, scattered all over YouTube.
How about live shows? Do you have any live shows coming up?
Not at the moment, but we're working on it.
Yeah, we got to get you booked. I got to come out and see you, man.
Well, it's one of those crazy things. Like one show that we were booked for, but kind of fell through because I had to have surgery, was going to happen here in Toronto. But ironically, it was a promoter from Frankfurt who booked it. Yeah, we have a hard time getting shows in our own city, so.
I wonder why that is, man. And maybe it's the sound. No, it's not, because the sound that you're making is sound that people my age or younger are listening to.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're too old to go mingling on say like Dundas West on a Thursday night when the doors open at 11 p.m. when you got to be sitting at your desk at 8 o'clock in the morning the next day. You know,
I know. I know what you mean. That's why platforms like this will hopefully get you in to other people's ears.
But Bang Electronica's Activierung will be coming out on 12-inch probably about 6 months from now. So that's one of our side projects. And check out Dave Routh's Auto Panic project. Also check out his side project called The Beautiful Spies, because he does that with Dina from Techniques Berlin. So it's the whole bomb shelter scam. It's still going on.
That's awesome.
Bunch of bands, couple people.
Well, when you say that you're dropping a 12-inch, is that going to be distroed in local record stores?
I don't know. It's hard to tell because it's actually, that track hit the German alternative charts in the 90s, again in 2004, and again when it was released in 2011. So it's going to be a limited edition of 500 copies. So I imagine it would disappear pretty fast.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's probably not going to make it to North American shores, but it's going to be out on Mechanica Records. So.
Well, that's cool, man, and congratulations for that.
They're based in Poland right now, so yeah. So
well,
it's going to be exciting to see what happens this year.
I bet, man, and I look forward to talking to you. I know we're going to stay in touch, and I've been saying this to most of my guests. When I do get a better setup, like right now, I'm doing this from my comfort of my living room on a stock camera and a simple microphone. As time goes on, I do hope to improve my setup, and when I do, I hope you'll come back and join me for a round 2. Would you be down for that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Drop by. You're welcome at my place anytime. Give you some studio pointers, and
I appreciate that. You know what? And I am like Robinson Crusoe on a mixer right now, because when people come over, I'm serious. Like, my buddy came over to set up what I'm doing right now with the picture. See, I can't even get that right. Everything's mirror image, so I'm backwards all the time. But the picture that I have up, even that was complicated because he left it with my picture up, and then I'm like, well, how do I put someone else's? He's like, you go to browse. I'm like, no, dude. I said I just want to click things. I don't want to have to click other things. And he's like, buddy, it's not hard. Just go to. And I'm like, oh. So it's my own stubbornness, but I really, honestly, man, like when it comes to doing what I'm doing, I know people who do this typically will have 3 or 4 people around them that are helping them with the other parts of this. You know what I mean? So it's tough as an individual to do all that. But as I go on, I do want to learn, and I appreciate you offering that. So thank you.
Well, you know what? I mean, we have a lot in common, because when we started doing music, we were the same way. I mean, like we would hook up one keyboard and a microphone to a mixer, and we would record, and a drum machine, and we would record keyboards and drum machine to a reel-to-reel, and then we'd play back the reel-to-reel through a mixer onto a cassette.
Yeah.
We would put like the next couple of parts down, and then we played the cassette back again, and I'd do my vocal back to the reel-to-reel, and that's
yeah, man. No, I'm with you. That's exactly how we. I know I'm post you, but I did the same thing that you're describing right now, probably 20 years after you were doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's easy.
There's something to be said about that Robinson Crusoe style, because you learn that creativity is more important than the technology is.
Thank you. I didn't think of it like that, but yeah, I guess here's the thing. It's just, I said at a young age, is that if you're good, it doesn't matter how good your sound is. People will realize how good you are, and they'll bring you to better places that will make you sound better. And that's honestly what I'm noticing right now, is that people are investing in me. Like I have people offering help, like what you just did, because they see potential, I guess, and they're like, you know what, you've got something here. Can I help you? Rather than just going, oh, you should just shut up.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
but anyways, Andreas, with that, I'm going to let you go. Here, can you just stay on the phone with me? I'm going to say goodbye to my listeners. Stay on the phone?
Yeah.
All right, give me one
sure.
sec. All right, guys, that was him, Andreas, one of 3 from Techniques. Am I doing this right? Yeah, I got it right for the first time. Techniques Berlin. Check them out. Like I said, links will be below, so go there. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, peace out.